हरि ओम। वक्रतुंड महाकाय सूर्यकोटि समप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा। गुरु ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वरः गुरु साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Namaste, friends. Welcome to session 40 of new series Gift Gita for Inner Freedom and Transformation, a study of selected verses from Bhagavad Gita based on Shankara Bhashya. In today's session, we will continue our study of 8th chapter with verses 8.11 to 8.15. To explain these verses, we have Dr. Netra, Dr. Satya, Colonel Vijayan, Shri Shiv Kumar, and Srimati Shamala. Dr. Sundar sir will moderate the session and bring out the final points. Over to you, Dr. Sundar sir.
सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ हरि ओम् श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। We have entered the Madhyama Shatakam and presently studying the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I have tried to put the broad topics of this chapter in this slide. We started off with this first topic, which comprised of the 6 definitions, which Arjuna asked a question in the previous chapter, and thus this chapter began with the answers for these questions. The second topic is a unique discussion on death, significance of remembrance of God at the time of death, which is unique to this chapter. And the third broad topic is Krama Mukti, the method, which is again unique to the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. The exposition of death and the significance of remembrance through these two broad topics in this chapter brings us fond memory of the study of the Kathopanishad, where again we have the teacher Yama Dharmaraja, who is the god of death himself. And no wonder several verses of this chapter, as we shall see in the class today, derive their origin from the Kathopanishad. The final topic of this chapter is a compare and contrast of two travelers who take two different paths and attain to two different goals. Here we should remember the background of broadly Sakama and Nishkama Bhaktas. We have seen in the earlier chapters of the Bhagavad Gita that Sakama Bhaktas are after material results. They are also called as Arthartharthi Bhaktas, and they use God as a means for material ends. The Nishkama Bhaktas, having benefited from Sakama Bhakti, yet not getting lasting happiness, peace, and security, change their lifestyle using their accomplishments as a means, and they are in search of God himself as the goal. And in this category belong the Jijnasu Bhaktas. This journey culminates in Advaita Jnanam, and the person there is called as a Jnani Bhakta. We saw this in the description of Lord Krishna in the 7th chapter, Chaturvarnyam Maya Shrishtam, these 4 types of bhaktas. So although Lord Krishna described 4 types of bhaktas there, the Arthartharthi are grouped together as one group. And then we have Jijnasu as the second group and the Jnani as the third group. Jnani being the destination, the Advaita Jnanam that all of us seek, we can broadly look at the comparison between Sakama and Nishkama Bhaktas, 2 broad groups. In the Nishkama Bhakta, again, there are two groups based on whether a person gets the benefit of Guru Shastra Sampradaya, Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam, and such a bhakta then is able to do Nirguna Ishvara Dhyanam or Nididhyasanam and attains Jivan Mukti. So this chapter sets aside even that group of Nishkama Bhaktas. And then we are left with two groups now, Sakama Bhaktas or Arthatati Bhaktas, and those Nishkama Bhaktas who did not have the benefit of Guru Shastra Sampradaya, who were unable to do Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam, and thereby unable to get Jivatma Paramatma Aikya Jnanam. So these are the two groups that are being compared in this third topic, which deals with the two travelers, two paths, and the two goals. So that was the broad outlook of this chapter. We have now reached to that juncture in this chapter where the verses basically are covering the third and the fourth such broad topics. So we shall see in today's class the Krama Mukti, how the prana is withdrawn to the Hridayam, how it is directed by via Sushumna Nadi and Brahmarandram towards the bright path or Shuklagati. We shall see in today's class how much important the yogic practices are, how much important Upasana is, and also just the beginning of the final topic, which is about the two travelers' paths and the goals. With this brief introduction, I invite Dr. Netra to present towards the first verse for today. Over to you, Dr. Netra.
Namaste, Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. As mentioned in this slide, the 8th chapter starts with a description of the 7 questions which Arjuna asked in the 7th chapter. And this has been described in the first 2 verses. The 6 questions are discussed in the 3rd and 4th verses. And from the 5th verse till the end of the chapter is discussion of the 7th question as to what is the significance of remembering God at the time of death. As was mentioned by Dr. Sundar, Upasanam are of 2 types, Sakama and Nishkama. Further, the Nishkama Upasana is of 2 types, Krama Mukti, Jivan Mukti. And the Krama Mukti, that is Shuklagati Marga through Sushumna Nadi, was discussed in the previous 10th verse. After this, in this 11th verse, Lord Krishna gives us a brief definition of glory of God. So coming to the 11th verse. Yedaksharam vedavido vadanti vishanti yadyato vitaragaha yadi chanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe. Yedaksharam padam, that imperishable goal. Vedavido vadanti, which the knower of the Vedas speak about. Vishanti means to attain. Yadyatayo vitaragaha, which the dispassionate sannyasis. Yadi chinto, desiring which. Brahmacharyam charanti, they live a life of brahmacharya. Tatte, that to you, padam, goal. Sangrahena pravakshaye, I shall briefly declare. Coming to the next slide. Ishvara Upasanam are of 2 types. Sakama Saguna Upasana, which is done for worldly or materialistic goals. Nishkama Saguna Upasana, which is done for spiritual benefit or moksha. Further, Nishkama Upasaka can be of 2 types, depending on whether the person does it under the guidance of a guru and shastra. A person attains Jivan Mukti when done under the spiritual and guru guidance, whereas the path taken by the Gnignasu without exposure to Guru or Shastra is by Shukla Marga leading to Krama Mukti. So these 2 margas depend on the path followed and what one remembers at the time of death. In the next slide, the 10th verse dealt with the Shuklagati Marga and Krama Mukti for a Gnignasu, not exposed to Guru nor Shastra. So coming to the next slide, that is the 11th verse, is discussing as to where Krishna is talking about the glory of God. Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti, that is, the destination is God. And all the Veda Vidaha, that is, the Vedic learners, the expert in the scriptures, call it as Aksharam. Aksharam means the absolute reality, the imperishable one, the infinite means, which is the source of peace, security, happiness, the only source of happiness and only source of fullness. Yad Yatyaha Vishanti, which is accomplished by committed seekers. Literally, sannyasi here represents a person who pursues the spiritual goal single-mindedly to the exclusion of every other thing. In the next slide, so what is the qualification of these Vedic seekers? Vitaragaha. That means those who have turned away from the finite goals of life after attempting all other goals and have found out that everything other than God is finite or apara prakriti. God alone represents para prakriti. That aksharam alone can give everything in this creation that one wants as security and take us towards infinite. And at this point, we should remember the cardboard chair. The cardboard chair, you can do everything except what? You cannot sit over it. Similarly, everything in the creation you can handle, you can use, you can be nearby, but do not expect emotional security from that. If you want security, it is alone given by Aksharam. Yedi chinto brahmacharyam charanti. Desiring this spiritual goal alone, the seekers follow the life of brahmacharyam. So in this context, brahmacharya means the committed study of scriptures. Aham sangrena pravakshaye. So Lord Krishna tells here that he shall briefly define the nature of that Ishvara. And he promises that here, but he gives a definition later in the verses 20, 21, 22. So in this verse, Krishna is defining the God. So in the next slide, so in conclusions, the 8th chapter deals with Shukla Marga when questioned about the reason to remember God at the time of death. And after describing Shukla Marga, the way to attain Mukti in the absence of scriptures and Guru, in the 11th verse, Krishna gives us the brief definition of God. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Netra. Your description comprehensively covered the content in this verse. So to understand this, we need to briefly recall the previous verse, which is the 8.10, which actually started the discussion of the procedure or the method of Krama Mukti in this chapter. That verse was Prayana Kale Manasachalena Bhaktya Yukto Yoga Balena Chaiva Bruvor Madhye Pranam Aveshya Samyak Sa Tam Param Purusham Upayeti Divyam. So that shloka ended up with the last line, Tam Upayeti, you shall attain to Purusham Divyam Param. So that verse said, if you trek to the method of Krama Mukti, you shall attain to God. And then he glorifies that God in this verse, in this present verse. And however, he says, Sangrahayena Pravakshe. But that description of God himself, as Dr. Netra mentioned, comes in these three later verses, which are listed in the lower part of the slide. So he glorifies that God by saying no verse of the Veda, they talk about this God, and sannyasis who are free from raga, they travel to merge with him, and those who are desiring to know him take to brahmacharyam. So in these three ways, Lord Krishna is glorifying that God. In the Bhashyam, the discussion is whether the reference to God is Saguna Brahma or is it Nirguna Brahma. And Adi Shankaracharya uses certain fundamental arguments to say that this is all about Nirguna Brahma and not Saguna Brahma. And he also says that by just doing this yogic process, one doesn't attain to Nirguna Brahma. As a part of Krama Mukti, one goes through Brahmaloka and in 2 stages. That is, he gets Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam through the best teacher, which is Brahmaji in the Brahmaloka, and then attains to Mukti, which is Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. So what are the arguments that Adi Shankaracharya uses to prove that the reference here is to Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara and not Saguna Brahma? This confusion is further so because in the 15th chapter, we see Kshara, Akshara, and Uttama Purusha. The word Aksharam figures here. In that chapter, Akshara Purusha doesn't really refer to Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. So there are reasons thus, therefore, for Adi Shankaracharya to say what is the reference of the nature of God here. So the 2 quotations that Adi Shankaracharya gives in Bhashyam are put here. And the first one is from Kathopanishad, which is a very similar wording to what this verse is. And it shows that this verse is perhaps taken by Lord Krishna from Kathopanishad itself. And there, the mantra preceding this in that Upanishad was that famous, the most famous mantra of Kathopanishad, Anyatra Dharmat, Anyatra Adharmat, other than Dharma and Adharma, other than cause and effect, other than present, past, and future, Yad Pashyasi Tattvada. So that was a clear question there from Nachiketa to Lord Yama to tell him very clearly of what is Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. So therefore, Adi Shankaracharya says that this is a reference to Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara itself. The other reference quotation is this from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, where you can see the word Aksharam, which is figured in this shloka also. And there 23 negating points are given, attributes are given to say that the God referred to is not this and that. Again, going to show that the reference that is made out here is to formless Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. Another interesting thing in the Bhashyam, which Pujya Swami Padmanabhanandaji points out, is that the first line, Veda Vidaha, refers to Jnani Bhakta, and those who are Vitragaha makes a reference to giving up the Arthartharthi kind of bhakti. And third line, Icchantaha Brahmacharyam Charanti, refers to the desirers of knowledge, which is Jnanasu Bhakti. So therefore, all the 4 types of bhakti are covered in the verse. Now we go to the next verse. I invite Dr. Satyanarayana to present this verse. Over to you, Dr. Satyanarayana.
Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Verse 8.12 goes like this. Svar sarva dvarani samyamya mano riddhi nirudhya cha murdhya dhyayatmana pranam astito yoga dharanam. Coming on to the word meanings. Sarva dvarani samyamya means restraining all the gates of the body. Mano riddhi nirudhya cha, fixing the mind in the heart region. Murdhya dhyayatmana pranam, and then drawing the life breath to the head. Astito yoga dharanam, get established in steadfast yogic concentration. Means the verse meaning is restraining all the gates of the body and fixing the mind in the heart region, and then drawing the life breath to the head, one should get established in steadfast yogic concentration. Okay. Next slide, coming on to the meaning. Next slide. Lord Krishna is talking about prayana kala Ishvara smaranam, and as a means of Krama Mukti. Always Upasanam goes along with Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga procedures are mentioned in this shloka. The first step is Pratyahara after taking an asana. That is Sarva Dwarani Samyamya. Dwarani means Dasha Indriyani. All the 10 sense organs, including Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas, must be withdrawn, indicated in Ashtanga Yoga as Pratyahara. And Atmana Pranam Murdhani Adhyaya. By the practice of pranayama, the pranic flow must be withdrawn from all the nadis and brought to Hridayam, brought to Sushumna Nadi, and through Sushumna Nadi, it must be brought to Brahmarandram. Having focused the mind by going through these preliminary steps of Ashtanga Yoga, then he has to implement the Upasana part, and that is yogic concentration. Next slide. Coming on to Upasana, Ishvara Smaranam has to be done by making use of some or the other symbol, because Upasanam always requires a symbol for Upasya Devata. Since Upasya Devata is not Pratyaksha Gochara, that is not available for direct perception, Upasya Devata must always be indicated by a symbol which has to be Pratyaksham. And that symbol is called as Alambanam. And the Alambanam can be either Pratima Alambanam or Pratika Alambanam. Pratima Alambanam is an Alambanam where the symbol has clear features like hands, face, legs. So all the murtis like that of Rama, Krishna, Devi, all of them will come under Pratima Alambanam. When the Alambanam does not have clear features or the limbs, it is called as Pratika Alambanam. That is Shivalingam, Omkara Shabda, Omkara Mantra, Flame, all come under Pratika Alambanam. Next slide. Beautiful. And of these various Alambanams, the most glorious one is said to be Omkara Alambanam, because all the Upanishad glorify Omkara as an ideal symbol of Ishvara. Omkara is unique symbol. It can be used as a word and it can be used as a symbol also. So Omkara Upasanam is the means for attaining that Parabrahman. So Krishna borrows this from Upanishad and introduces Omkara Alambana Ishvara Upasana in next verse. Let us see. Hari Om.
Thank you, Dr. Satyanarayana, for the comprehensive presentation of the verse. This and the next verse are related. Therefore, I shall discuss the 12th and the 13th verses together for my comments. Now I invite upon Colonel Vijayan to present his verse. Over to you, Vijayan, sir.
Thank you, sir. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Verse chapter 8, verse 13. In these verses 12 and 13, Bhagwan Shri Krishna is talking about Ishvara Upasana with the help of Omkara Alambana. Verse 12 explained the preliminary steps of Ashtanga Yoga. Verse 13 will explain the methods and benefits of Omkara Upasana. Antikale Ishvara Smaranam is the only means of Krama Mukti. Our scriptures represent the Supreme Lord through symbols. It can be in the form of Pratima symbols like Rama, Krishna, etc., or through Pratika symbols like Shivalingam, Saligram, etc. These symbols are known as Alambanam. Om is a Pratika Alambanam. Om is also called Pranava, the sound manifestation of Brahman. Swami Vivekananda says that we can worship anything by seeing God in it. The significance of Om has been explained in various Upanishads. Mandukya Upanishad deals totally with the knowledge of the Absolute through Omkara and Omkara Upasana. It says, Om iti ityed aksharam idam sarvam. Om represents the past, present, and future, and encompasses all existence, conscience, and bliss. Kathopanishad says, Etad alambanam gyatva brahmaloke mahiyate. Om is the best support, knowing which one becomes blessed in the world of Brahman. Again, Krishna Upanishad says, Omkara is both para and apara. By meditating on Omkara itself, one attains the absolute by shaking all sins like a snake coming out of its slough. Taittiriya Upanishad says, Om iti Brahman, Om itidam sarvam. The sacred Om sound is Brahman. All this is the syllable Om. Secondly, this verse is directed to an Ajnani. He is not aware of the essential oneness between Jivatma and Paramatma. This Ajnani Upasaka uses Omkara Alambanam for Saguna Ishvara Upasana as a means of Krama Mukti. Now coming to the verse, Om iti ekaksharam brahmaha vyaharan mam anusmaran ya prayati tyajyen deham sayati paramam gati. Uttering the mono-syllable Om, which is the name of Brahman, and remembering me, one departs, leaving the body, attains the supreme goal. Next slide, sir. The first line gives out the method, and the second line the benefits. Om iti ekaksharam. Om, the name of Brahman with one syllable. The word Brahma here should be understood as Brahma Nama, the name of Brahman. Shankaracharya says, Brahma Namaha Abhidhana Bhutam. Abhidhanam means name. So Omkara is the Abhidhanam or Nama of Brahman. Therefore, Omkara itself is called Brahman. Vyaharan means Ucharanam. That is, it is not the mental utterance, but it is the actual oral utterance. Only the word Ucharanam means that we have to use the mouth to say it. Again, Chandogya Upanishad states that Omkara should be worshipped as Udgita, that is sung in a high-pitched melody. Mam Anusmaran. Mam means Ishvara and Anusmaran means meditating upon. Not only mere utterance of the Nama is enough, but along with that, the meaning in the form of the Saguna Ishvara also must be remembered. Next slide, sir. Ya prayati tyajyen deham sa yati paramam gati. This line defines the benefit of Upasana mentioned earlier. Prayati tyajyen deham. If the mere word prayati is there, it would mean maranam or depart. Maranam will mean extinction. But when the specification deham tyajyen is included, it will indicate Maranam is not the extinction of the Upasaka. Maranam stroke departure is only dropping the external clothing. It is not extinction of the Upasaka. Veda Pramana says death is not extinction of the individual. Death is only dropping of the superficial layer called the Sthula Sharira. The Sukshma Shariram continues, the Karna Shariram continues, the Punya Papa continues, and therefore travel is there. All these are indicated by the word Deham Tyajyen. Sayati Paramam Gati. Such a Jivatma travels to the highest goal of life. They travel towards Krama Mukti, by which we mean going to Brahmaloka, gaining knowledge and liberation. To remember God at the time of death is easier said than done. It can only be achieved by continuous practice throughout our life. A verse from the Shiva Sotram defines the desire of an Upasaka on the deathbed. Ati Bhishana Katubhashana Yama Kinkara Patale Prutatadana Paripidana Maranagama Samiye Umaya Saha Mama Chetasi Yamasasana Nivasan Shiva Shankara Harime Duratam. Hari Om. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. You have rightly pointed out the Adhikari Bheda. So Adi Shankaracharya in his Bhashyam says that there is a differentiation in the adhikari, in the sense the Uttama adhikari takes to Guru Shastra Sampradaya, and there is a systematic learning, Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, leading to Jivan Mukti here and now, which is the content of the other chapters of the Madhyama Shatakam. And the method of Krama Mukti, which is the important part of this chapter, is usually for a Madhyama Adhikari. For whatever reason, he has not had the benefit of Guru Shastra Sampradaya. Now, the first shloka of this today's class was about Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. So there is a difficulty to meditate, to abide in, to know something which is attributeless and formless. So therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita as well as the Upanishads, there is help taken of something to make the journey of the seeker easier. I had told earlier that the Kathopanishad verse which described Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara followed the famous question from Nachiketa, which is Anyatra Dharmat, Anyatra Adharmat. There also we notice that following that description of Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara, there is Omkara Upasana suggested as a means to make it easier to attain to that Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. And that is that quotation which is there on this slide, the 1.2.17, Etad Alambhanam Shreshtham, Etad Alambanam Param. And in this chapter also we see that following the shloka which described Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara by the author, there is a stepping down to a kind of upasanam which makes it easier to understand Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. So this chapter is not only taking verses from Kathopanishad, but is following a similar style of presentation of describing, bringing to fore Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara and then presenting Omkara as a means for attaining to that Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. Here, another interesting thing is there is a samuchaya of Ashtanga Yoga and Upasana. The 12th shloka was about Ashtanga Yoga. It has components which deal with Indriya Nigraha, which deal with Mano-Nigraha, and which deal with Pranayama. Sarvadvarani Samyamya refer to Indriya Nigraha. Mano Hridi Nirudhyacha refer to Mano Nigraha, and Mudnya Adhyatma Adhayatmanaha Pranam refers to Pranayama. And having done that Ashtanga Yoga part, the next sloka is about Upasana in the form of Omkara Upasana. Why is all this being shown as a part of Krama Mukti? In the Bhashyam, Pujya Swami Paramarthananda ji explains that this practice of Krama Mukti is a very difficult one. One needs to have so much control on the indriyas, on the mind, and also on one's prana. At the time of death, this person who is a master of yogic practices is able to draw the prana through one of the 101 nadis towards the heart, then direct it towards the Brahmarandam to make it to go through the Shuklagati, as we shall see in the further shlokas of this chapter. Not just that, as we see in the Upasana part, which is the 13th shloka, having done those yogic practices, he should also be Vyaharan, he should also be uttering the name of Brahman, which as the shloka has shown is Om. He should be uttering that and he should remember God. So All this requires tremendous amount of yogic prowess, tremendous amount of practice all his life. So Swamiji also says that Ashtanga Yoga is not such a strong requirement as we see in other chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, which deal with Jnana Yogyata and Jnanam and attaining to Jivatma Paramatma Aikyam. So in a way, Swamiji says that it is perhaps easier to take to that. And since majority of chapters, Lord Krishna describes that path, that is the path that is recommended for us, that we make use of the gurus that we have, spend time in Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam, and attain to Jivan Mukti here and now. However, Swamiji also says that since this chapter is there, since these verses is there, for the completion of understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, we need to understand this Ashtanga Yoga and the Omkara Upasana leading to Krama Mukti. An interesting thing about Omkara is it's a versatile mantra and it can be used as Upasanam for Madhyama Adhikari, as seen in this chapter, for Mukti as Krama Mukti through Brahma Loka in 2 stages. It is also a versatile mantra which can be used as a part of Jnana Yoga for Nididhyasanam, for Mahavakya Vichara, to realize Jivan Mukti here and now, as is described in the 9th chapter. Now, we shall see the next verse. Over to you, Shukmar sir.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. From the 5th slide onwards, Bhagwan has been answering Arjuna's question regarding remembrance of the Lord at the time of death. Antakala Ishvara Smaranam to attain Krama Mukti. In the previous 2 shlokas, conditions for Krama Mukti were explained. The condition of remembering the Lord at the time of death seems to be an impossible condition, impractical. Is the Lord presenting an ideal mystic sadhana for the Upasaka? Would the Lord explain this as an option if it is impossible? Bhagwan Krishna answers these questions in this shloka 14. Ananya chetaha satatam yomam smarati nityasaha tasyaham sulabha partha nityayuktasya yoginaha. Next slide, sir. Krishna says it is possible only by abhyasa, sheer abhyasa, or practice of remembering all the time that everything that I am associated with belongs to the Lord alone, and I have been given an opportunity to be with various people so that I can learn to love them without getting attached or developing a sense of security from them. Understand that the Lord has just given them to me to use, and when the situation of separation comes, I should recall that all belongs to the Lord. I should not worry what will happen to my possessions or relations, but just hand them over to the Lord, by which my mind will not dwell on that. This sounds simple, but it requires deep determination and committed practice. Hence, Bhagwan Krishna says here, Ya mam nityam smarathi. Remember every moment that there is no individual or even a personal God separate from God, representing the totality of Brahman. This can be illustrated with a simple example of the wave and ocean. Just as there is a wave, that there is no wave separate from the ocean, the wave being fundamentally related to the ocean, it rises from the ocean, exists in the ocean, and it resolves into the ocean. A relationship between 2 waves or existence of the wave itself is incidental and temporary. But fundamentally, a wave and ocean are one and the same, devotion. Hence, a fundamental relationship makes me a bhakta, and incidental relationship makes me a husband or father, brother, etc. In incidental relationships, I should always play my role well, but in my preoccupation with the incidental relationships, I should not lose sight of the fundamental relationship with the Lord. How should I, next slide, sir. How should I remember this? This verse clearly answers, Ananya Chetaha, without being distracted by my incidental roles. And how do I do this? Swami Paramarthanandaji gives the example of a musician who constantly pays attention to the Thampura Shruti to maintain that his music is in proper Shruti. Similarly, Ananya Chetaha, always remember God in the background while playing the incidental role. Tasya, for such a Nishkama Upasaka, Aham Sulabha, I am the easiest person to remember. The mind remembers what we value most in our lives. Just as a person attached to money will always remember money, irrespective of what he is doing. Similarly, if I know the value, remembering the Lord is easier. Easier for the one who is always integrated, balanced, and clear about his priorities in life. A nitya yuktasya yoginaha, a yogi who is ever steadfast. Therefore, it is easy for a upasaka who is steadfast, and yoginaha, a upasaka yogi. In Grihastha-ashrama, when I sit in meditation, there is disturbance from family members. Swami Paramarthanandaji says, Vanaprastha-ashrama is the exclusive ashrama prescribed for Saguna Upasana. Grihastha-ashrama is for Karma Yoga, and Vanaprastha-ashrama is Upasana Yoga, and Sannyasa Ashrama is for Gnana Yoga. And Veda Adhyayanam is in Brahmacharya Ashrama. Nirguna Ishvara Gnanam is practiced in Sannyasa Ashrama. Next slide, sir. In this shloka, there are two words with similar sounding meaning, Satatam and Nityasaha. Satatam means always, and Nityasaha means daily. Bhagavad Pada Adi Shankaracharya says Satatam and Nityasaha. Here it means 24/7 Upasana. In Vanaprastha-ashrama, our duties are reduced. Even Panchamaha Yagnas are exempt. Hence, throughout the day, other than the time devoted for minimum duties, remember the Lord. Remember the Lord 24/7 for life, and for such a person, Prayana Kala Ishvara Swarupam is effortless. Hence, Tasya Yogina. Here, the word yogi means one who is a Ashtanga yogi plus Saguna Upasaka plus Vanaprastha. And for such a yogi, Lord says, Aham Sulabha. Next slide, sir. Let me conclude with the essence of this shloka. Krishna says that this Upasana for Krama Mukti is very much possible, provided a sadhaka simultaneously practices both Ashtanga and Ashtanga Yoga and Ishvara Upasana. Not for 1 or 2 years, but throughout his life. For such a person, Krama Mukti is not only practically possible, but it will be Sulabha, effortless. The example given are the cricket players or tennis or any sports persons, a sprint runner, who achieve their success only because of their constant and steadfast practice with the help of a dietitian, trainer, coach, etc. They strictly follow the advice of the trainers with primary and only focus on their goal. Hari Om, Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha, Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you, Shukmar sir, for that description of this verse. We have seen through the previous verses that Krama Mukti is not easy. It requires a strong grip on the Ashtanga Yoga practices and also remembrance of God at the time of death. So the question now is, how is it possible to remember him at the time of death? Because for most of us, even when we are hale and hearty, constant remembrance is difficult. So when we are in a lot of pain at the time of death, how to remember him? So this verse, therefore, also belongs to the second major topic in this chapter, which was about the significance of remembering God at the time of death. So at that time, we had seen the three rules which are presented in this chapter as an answer for three questions which arise. So how to remember, first of all, why to remember him at the time of death? Because by remembering him at the time of death, we attain to him. That was the first rule. And second is how to remember at the time of death. That answer was in the form of the second rule, which is by remembering him at all times. That is what is required for Krama Mukti also. That leads to the third question, how to remember him always. And the answer for that formed the third rule, which has been partially covered in the earlier verses, that we remember him at all times by surrendering our mind and intellect to him, and by valuing him and therefore practicing his remembrance. This was covered in the shloka 7th and 8th. This verse gives one additional reason, a method, a toolkit to help us to remember him at all times. So the key word here is ananya chetaha. Chetaha is a reference to the mind, and ananya means in exclusion of all other thoughts. So in exclusion of all other thoughts, one remembers God. That is, one's mind is soaked with God thoughts at all times. So how to do that? So Swamiji very beautifully explains this, but by saying that in my preoccupation with incidental relationships, which is husband, wife, father, mother, brother, sister, all these incidental relationships, I should not lose sight of the fundamental relationship, which is God. So I may be doing various duties, but at all the times not forgetting my fundamental relation, because he is the cause of all causes. He is the cause of all the other relationships that I have too. So therefore, Ananya Chetaha is remembering this fundamental relationship and abiding our thoughts at all times in this. In the Bhashyam, there is some discussion on why the words Satatam and Nitya are there, because both of them have a similar meaning. So Adi Shankaracharya explains Satatam is continuous and Nitya Saha is daily. So when we prescribe medicines, we write 2 times a day, 3 times a day. By qualifying with the word Satatam, that word daily, Nityaha, the usage is continuously daily. There should be a remembrance of God. So that means at all times. So this verse therefore shows how this yogi is able to do Ashtanga Yoga and remember God at the time of death because of this method which is shown in this verse. So we can see in the third quarter, Tasyaham Sulabha Partha. So Lord Krishna is saying that by doing all this, he is going to have a merger with God. So a question arises, what is the benefit of such merger with God? So that is answered in the subsequent shlokas, starting with the next one, which I invite Shamala Madam to present.
Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. With the previous verse, Krishna says, for the one who constantly remembers me, I am easily gained. The 15th verse goes like this. Mamupetya punarjanma dukkhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmanaha samsiddhim paramangataha. Next slide, please. Yeah. From this verse, that is the 15th up to 22nd verse, Krishna wants to talk about two types of possible human goals. One is God and the other is world, infinite and the finite. And he wants to point out that for an intelligent person, God alone becomes the primary goal. With regard to all finite goals or accomplishments, there are three defects, doshas, dukkha mishritatvam, atriptikaratvam, bandhakatvam. Krishna says God alone represents purnatvam, independence, and therefore choosing God is the wisest choice. Krishna wants to declare in these verses. Next slide, please. He says, Mam upetya. If a person attains me, the Lord, then what is the benefit? Mam upetya is equal to Mam Ishwaram upetya. So here the word Mam doesn't refer to the finite Krishna Shariram, but it refers to Samashti Ishvara, the totality. Shankaracharya carefully adds Madbhavam Apadya. So merging into Ishvara means total non-difference between Jivatma and Paramatma. That is why the example of Ghatakasha merging into Mahakasha is given. Hereafter, we cannot say this part is Ghatakasha, that part is Mahakasha. When Akasha itself doesn't have parts, how can Bhagavan, who is as pervasive or more pervasive than Akasha, how can Ishvara have a part? Therefore, merger means there is absolutely no difference. Next slide, please. Krishna says further, Punarjanma na apnuvanti. They do not gain rebirths. They never come to finitude again. They never come to mortality again. What is wrong in attaining rebirth? Krishna gives two descriptions about the Punarjanma, Dukkhalayam and Ashashvatam. Next slide, please. Krishna coins a new word, Dukkhalayam, a temple of sorrows. We have heard temple of Rama, Krishna, Shiva, etc. Why this word Alaya he used? In Ramalaya, in Shivalaya, Rama, Shiva are permanently established through praṇa pratishtha, not temporary. And in the finite world of samsara, the only permanent thing is what? Dukkhalayam. Dukkham is permanently installed. Even if there is so-called sukham, it is a temporary forgetfulness of dukkham only. It is not absence of dukkham. Next slide, please. Therefore, to dukkhanam alayam is equal to ashrayam. Ashrayam means an abode. Dukkhalayam means a place where all the pains acquired in different past janmas, they all will come and settle down. Even though this janma is one, the pains come from all the past janmas, and we don't even remember the details of papams we have done. But they remember, and they nicely will be delivered at the right address properly without any confusion. This is the first description. Why Punarjanma is Dukkhalayam? Because it is Ashashvatam, means highly unstable, impermanent, fleeting. Next slide, please. Who are freed from this kind of birth and rebirth? Mahatmanaha are those wise men, those successful people who have made a wise choice in their life. Such Mahatmas gain the ultimate success. Paramam Sansiddhim Gataha. Sansiddhim is success. The only real success is moksha, and this they have gained. Puja Dayananda Swamiji says, Parama means it is the most exalted among Purusharthas. Those who have gained this freedom will not come back again. They have accomplished the highest goal of Purnatvam. They have accomplished moksha. Again, Dayananda Swamiji says, even though gaining the Lord is easy, the result is the maximum. On the other hand, gaining a loka is difficult and the result is dukkha alaya. To choose the latter is a bad bargain. Hari Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Thank you very much, madam. You have comprehensively covered the shloka as well as the description in the Bhashyam. You have covered the key word, which is dukkhalayam, for the sake of remembrance for myself and for others. I will repeat it here. So there were two derivations for the word alayam in the Bhashyam. One is that it's a permanent fixture of all the dukkha's. Therefore, punarjanma is dukkhalayam. And the second derivation was that alayam is the meeting point. It's the juncture of all the dukkham. And you clearly pointed out that those dukkhas are not just of this janma, but they are all from the previous janma. So it's a powerful word, and understanding this, Lord Krishna is nudging us to not to take to the second path of return, but to vote and take to that path where there is no return. So not to take the return ticket. This shloka is the beginning of several shlokas we see till 22nd, which deal with one of the two paths. So what is this two travelers, two paths, and two destinations, which again make this chapter unique? So we should remember here towards the right side of the slide is Jnani Bhakta, and we saw in the 4th chapter Lord Krishna heaping praise on the Jnani Bhakta that he is verily himself. So therefore he is not, Jnani Bhakta is not neither a traveler path, but he is the destination. I mean, he is the ultimate destination. Of course, world is the other destination there. So we keep out the Jnani Bhakta out of the discussion of the two travelers and the two paths, because that is the ultimate destination. So the two travelers, as we see here, are the Sakama Bhaktas, Artha-Artharthi Bhaktas in that group, and the Nishkama Bhaktas were Jijnasu Bhaktas. We have seen earlier that the main differentiation between these two set of travelers is the Artha-Artharthi Sakama Bhaktas have made God means and world as a goal. So they have made God as a partner in their work to achieve worldly accomplishments. So they remember God only when there is trouble or when something has to be achieved through their some work. And we can clearly see that this is described in this chapter as the dark path. They may attain a lot of comforts, and you can see that in the word world of the prayers, heaven is also included. So heaven is not the ultimate thing in our scriptures. It is clubbed along with the pleasures of this world. So they take to the dark path, and their destination is this world, which includes the heaven. And as you can see, it's a return ticket. There is an arrow back. Once there is exhaustion of all the punya karmas, they come back. Whereas what happens to the second traveler? Now this second traveler, as I said earlier, has done Sakama Bhakti. God has blessed him amply. But he is smart enough to understand, like Madam presented, there are BAD defects in whatever he has accomplished. So he sees that lasting happiness, peace and security is not there. he goes and asks some Mahatmas, what is the wrong in the approach? This is what is signified by that Mundaka Upanishad mantra, Pariksha Lokan Karma Chitan. And then, fortunately for him, somebody points out that your approach has to be reversed. You should use your entire accomplishments as the means, and you are actually after God. Lasting happiness and peace and security is nothing but God. That is what is God, the formless Nirguna Swarupa Ishvara. So in this chapter, the Jnāsu is the second traveler. The second path in this chapter is the Krama Mukti, which is a two-staged, rather than intermediate station of Brahmaloka, Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam under Brahmaji, and then he attains to Mukti. But most of the other chapters of the Gita, the second path is one of Jivan Mukti, where, like our group, we are fortunate to have the benefit of several gurus. We take to Guru Shastra Sampradaya, we take to committed Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam and attain to Mukti, which is the destination, second destination, which is God. So this chapter does a nice comparison and contrast, as is shown in the slide, of two types of travelers, then two types of journey or path, and the two type of destination Lord Krishna is recommending for all of us. Be a Jijnasu type of traveler. Take to the path of Jivan Mukti is the message from all other chapters of the Gita. Only in this chapter, Krama Mukti is also okay if there is no benefit of Guru Shastra Sampradaya. Either of the two, take to Mukti as early as possible. That is the message. So with this, we'll conclude today. Over to you, Ankit sir.
Thank you, Sundar sir, and all speakers of the day for a beautiful session. Thank you, friends, for your active participation. Let's tune in at 6:45 p.m. on Friday, the 23rd August 24 for session 14 of Mandukya Upanishad to study Karikas 19 to 28 from Vaitatya Prakaranam. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you.